Media website, the Listen Live icon. You can also listen live via the Salam Media app or TuneIn app, and all free-to-air decoders. And I'm going to start a watch party of my profile so that you don't miss a thing. So right now, I'm going to the Salam Media page. You'll find it on Facebook at Salam Media. And I look for the video, which has just started, and I share a watch party on my profile. And that way, we get everybody joining the conversation today. And that's working perfectly well. I want to make sure that nobody misses a second of the show today. So without further ado, today we are in conversation with Robin Wonsley Warloba and Luna Gebriel. And I'm going to do their introductions now. So I'm going to ask Shazia, who's doing our tech today, to bring them onto camera for that part of the show. Fantastic. My comrade sister queens, welcome to the People's Voice.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Wonderful to have you on. So I'm going to do your introductions first because everyone in South Africa and whoever's watching in America and around the world needs to know who we're talking to. So Robin Wonsley Warloba is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America in Minneapolis and has been active in the Twin Cities socialist movement for many years. She's a labor organizer who played a leading role in the successful fight to win a $15 per hour minimum wage in 2017, the first Midwest city to do so. And now she works for the statewide teachers union. Welcome, Robin, to the show. Luna Gebriel is a first-generation Black immigrant from East Africa. She's a community organizer in Minneapolis working with Black Lives Matter, DSA, and CETO. And I quote, "My experience ranges from student organizing in college to worker organizing in different campaigns. I do this because I know that the only way to end systems of violence and fascism is through the liberation of all peoples globally." So I'm delighted to have you on, and I resonate, of course, with what we're talking about today, which is why when I saw Robin doing an interview, I think it was last week, I said, I've got to have her on. And she says, well, let's bring Luna on as well. So I'm really excited. And I see quite a few people joining us on the watch party already and the Facebook Live. Welcome, Rehana Khan Parker, who already says, wow, strong women. Rehana is an activist and an attorney working in South Africa. So let's start here, ladies. We're going to take a few ad breaks in between just to pay the bills, but let's just get into our questions. Number one, right?
Sure.
Here in South Africa, which has its own painful history of discrimination called apartheid, or apartheid as we say it, which to a large extent we still struggle with. The majority of us that are for human rights are watching the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests, the sustainability campaigns in solidarity. But for those people who don't yet understand what the movement is about, please break it down. Let's start with Robin. What is the origin of the movement, which I know was started by 3 Black women?
The origins of the movement. I mean, it's historical in the context of basically an empire, the U.S. way in which the U.S. regime has been built, not only just locally but globally across the world, has been based on exploitation. It's been based off of the genocide of not only those of African ancestry, but indigenous communities all across the world, especially Native communities here in North America. It's based off of those two core aspects of protecting private capital for those who own land, who own capital, all of those who own. I just want to centralize that. And we're not talking about like your house. We're talking about massive amount of capital, land. We're talking about resources. We're talking about buildings and companies. It starts in that history where police were essentially created to basically regulate not only slaves in the slave trade that was expanded into North America, but also to regulate workers as well, especially European workers that were brought to the U.S. is under the pretense of indentured servitude. So for them, it was also a way of policing from potential worker uprising as well as slave revolts. So we have this rich history in which the police, again, was always formed to protect private capital at the expense of Black and brown communities, as well as working class white folks. I for some reason, working class white folks forget that they don't win by, especially if you're poor and you're white. The police are not here to actually protect you either. And in rural areas across, I'm pretty sure in the U.S., we see that representation of poor white folks that are also incarcerated, that are also having these brutal encounters with law enforcers. So we have that history, and throughout several generations, several decades, we've had this continuing pattern of Black men, Black women, Black youth be brutalized, be murdered at the hands of the state through police officers. And in Minneapolis alone, in the span of 10 years, we've had numerous cases of Black folks being killed, especially in our millennial generation. We've had those murders be captured on video and then circulated across the world for everyone to see and
feel outraged. Robin, I want to pause you. I want to pause you right there and bring Luna into the conversation at exactly that point. Luna, why is Black Lives Matter still relevant in 2020 after Ferguson, after Occupy? Why is it still relevant?
Yeah, I mean, to Robin's point, we're talking about 400 plus years of exploitation, of racism, of classism. It is not just, like Black Lives Matter obviously began right after the acquittal of the murder of Trayvon Martin back in 2012. It was began by Patrisse Cullors, Opal Tometi, and Alicia Garza. And when I think about Black Lives Matter as a person who thinks about this work as it being global, it's not just about, it's important because we're not talking about something recent. We're not only also talking, it's not only also about like police brutality, right? On a global level, we're talking about the West's way of maintaining control and the way in which they just are constantly exploiting people, not only in the US. This is happening on a global platform, right? Imperialism is a part of it, right? Heavy militarization in other countries is a part of it. We are talking about not only the US police, but some places also in the global South. We're talking about how a lot of Black and brown countries also utilize the trainings of the police within the United States and other countries, right? And so how are we going to be, it's going to consistently be important because for a very long time, for all of those times that Robin was talking about historically, Black lives have never mattered to people. You can see that within apartheid. You can see that in this, you can see this, the struggle in the US is not alone. The struggle in the US is a struggle in Palestine. It is a struggle in South Africa, all over Africa. It is a struggle in all of these other Black and brown countries. And so the reason it's important because we have not won like tangible permanent wins towards the liberation and freedom of all people. And that can only happen through the liberation of working class people everywhere. Right? To end fascism, we're going to need it. We're going to need to build this solidarity between each other. And that is why we haven't won yet, but I think that we can.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Giving us context. They're both our women giving us context into this brilliant conversation. I can see the women joining the watch party are particularly enjoying the conversation. Sarisha Ramesh Dalkomal says, good afternoon. What a power-packed team. Looking forward to this interview. Salute. Rehana Khan going true, absolutely agreeing with what you're saying. So let's move on to the next question because we'll be taking an ad break very shortly, I would imagine. Let's talk about the murder of George Floyd. Like Collins Causa, I'm sure you're familiar by now, one of 12 human beings murdered under the COVID-19 lockdown in our country by the police or by the military, the SANDF. These humans are some of many who have been killed under lockdown and many more for decades and centuries, mainly for being poor, for being non-elite, for being people of color. Some names make it to mainstream media, most do not. Luna, let's start with you. How do we ensure that our voices and the violations of human rights and our activism for change are actually heard?
Yeah, I think again, like one of the only ways to do this is in numbers. I really believe that the reason even now we have begun to have even conversations about disbanding the police or eventually, hopefully, abolishing is because so many people, and I mean, so many people have come out. We have literally protests happening in all 50 states and over 20 countries, right? And so people are really rising up, and a lot of people who have never been to protests, who have have seen things in the past and didn't really even believe in the Black Lives Mattering, really, where they're just like, all lives matter, but it's like we need to discuss about a part of our society that is actually being exploited the most in some cases, right? And because of that, because they saw that video, because they saw murder happening, they came out. And a lot of Black folks are having this conversation. The police might even get us before Corona does, before COVID-19 does, because there isn't any safety. And I don't even think that the police state is really concerned about our safety, because when we are going to these demonstrations, Robin can even tell you about this, they are tear gassing us. They are hitting us with rubber bullets, right? We are talking about COVID being a respiratory virus, right? If you are hitting us with tear gas during a pandemic, what do you think that might do to our health? And so this isn't only,
100%.
there's a concern around public health around this. And I think one of the places that where we can have our voices be heard is through building some global solidarity between each other and actually rising up. We recently did an interview in Brazil, and there's protests happening all over Brazil, right? And so knowing that that's happening and building solidarity between comrades in other locations is going to be key to us actually having our voices be heard.
That's the key. Robin, let me move the mic in your direction. How difficult is it to build solidarity globally when social media conglomerates like Facebook, like YouTube, and the internet are censored? People are banned. You're denied the right to freedom of speech. How difficult is it?
I would say, and this is since even 2011, I'm thinking about the Occupy Wall Street movement, where it correlated with the Arab Spring uprising in Egypt. That was solely through Twitter and social media. Again, all these media conglomerates that are owned by, folks who are inherently against our interests and who don't want to see these uprisings sprouting out. Where folks are having that consciousness that, it's not white people, it's not the immigrants that's my problem. Maybe it's Mark. Maybe it's Jeff Bezos who owns Amazon. Maybe we need to turn our attention that way. So honestly, I would say social media has played such a powerful tool in us building these networks of solidarity across the globe, because in this particular moment, I don't think if all media outlets wasn't displaying the uprising, like moment by moment, what was happening on the ground to all the other countries, all the other states, we wouldn't have the mass actions that are taking place as Luna mentioned, in Brazil, in Mexico right now, in more than 20 countries. And I want to say social media played a really crucial role in amplifying what's happening on the ground and giving an accurate narrative as well. Not just framing it that it's looters that are disrespecting George Floyd's memory. It's white supremacists that's coming in and instigating all these things. No, I think the social media and videos that were shared by folks on the ground show, as Luna highlighted, no, it wasn't outside agitators who were throwing tear gas and shooting people. It was law enforcers. You saw them themselves. You will see huddles of peaceful protesters in front of the police precinct, and then an all-right, just rapid attack on them. And we capture that, I think, through protesters, individual, Facebook Live footages, to actually give an accurate context of what was happening and what really was inspiring people to, take mass action on a day-to-day basis. So I would say that social media has played a crucial role in bringing a global working class together around something that, as Luna highlighted, is not just isolated to African Americans' experiences or Black and brown folks' experiences in the U.S.
100%. My concern, however, is when movements get too big, and I've seen this happen with the Palestine movement, that Facebook pages are just deleted. So you've got to have backup pages, and you've got to look for an alternative to YouTube, platforms like BitChute, for example. But let's take some comments. We've got Sarisha Komal, who says, Ramesh Lal Komal, who says, numbers are vital, but it must start with as many intimate conversations, one-on-one as possible and consistently. This way we all understand and get the full depth of such atrocities. I'm sure you agree with that. And then we've got a comment from another Womandla author, Rashida Khan, who says, the police are a law unto themselves and it's a global phenomenon. We would have thought times would change for the better, but we seem to be regressing. Or as we're told, it's always been this bad, but now there is more awareness. And then Rehana Khan Parker talks about how do we prioritize, what do we do to prioritize Black Lives Matter? And we're going to get to that towards the latter part of the conversation. But I think we're going to take an ad break. So hang 10. When we come back, we'll be talking about the murder of Breonna Taylor.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Would you like to give Sadaqah 365 days a year? You can with the Al-Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your Daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
DuziMed Medicine Depot Retail Pharmacy and Emergency Medical Depot, conveniently situated in the DuziMed Medical Center, corner Burger and Bosser Street, Pietermaritzburg. We provide safe, affordable and convenient medical facilities, open till 10 p.m. every day of the year. We have a full-house clinic that operates from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., which is run by a qualified sister. The clinic offers immunization, vaccination, wellness, general consultation, and more. Call DuziMed Medicine Depot on 033 3421 DuziMed Medicine Depot, your pharmacy of choice.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
And we're back from the ad break in conversation with Robin Wonsley and Luna Gebriel on the People's Voice today, brought to you by Salam Media and your host, Shabnam Palesa Mohamed. So let's talk about Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor's life matters. She was murdered in her own home, shot multiple times by police who got away with her murder. Yesterday, an 8-month pregnant woman in South Africa, Thekofatso Pule, was hanged, presumably by her partner, as another incident of gender-based violence in our country and globally, of course. Women are amongst the worst discriminated and violated historically and globally because we're women. Is Breonna's murder given as much attention as the murder of George Floyd, Luna?
You said, sorry, can you repeat? Is her murder given as much attention?
Is the murder of Breonna Taylor given as much attention as the murder of George Floyd or Tamir Rice or Eric Garner?
Right.
Man,
absolutely not. Oh, what? Yeah, I was just going to say absolutely not. And that's something that I think the larger BLM movement, especially in Minneapolis, has tried to reconcile with, because the BLM movement, as we highlighted, has been was spearheaded by 3 Black women, 3 Black queer women, specifically, and the same has been the case even in Minneapolis. Wait, and we've had, I think, those women, first and foremost, in the history of the United States, all the civil rights movement that has really talked about challenging and contesting our racial empire of capitalism has always been led by Black and brown women and immigrant women. They've always been at the forefront of these movements, yet their recognition of their labor is never highlighted. So there is that gender dismissiveness of Black women's labor in the contributions that they've made to birth these massive and transformative movements that's really taken on our capitalist and racist empire. The same is, it comes down to the context of our anti-police brutality movements as well, where Black women, as you mentioned, are disproportionately also impacted by these institutions of policing and incarceration, yet their experiences are not given the scale of recognition into which we direct towards Black men. And what is cautious, what is nerve-wracking about this is not, we shouldn't be forced as a community to constantly pick sides between, or basically pick sides of supporting Black men, but in that case of amplifying their experiences, then undermining or being dismissive of Black women's experiences. And I feel like that is the constant dance we're doing within our current movement right now, because we can even bring the dynamic of Black trans folks into the conversation too. Just last week, another Black trans woman was murdered by the police, and that story got no recognition in the media. But in a way, their stories end up being afterthoughts or tag-alongs. Like right now, the case for Breonna Taylor has been reopened, but only due to fear of the massive uprisings that's been created in response to the George Floyd's murder. Whereas, again, where was the pretext for that to happen from the start? Why weren't we, burning shit down for our Black women who are constantly being targeted as well? So it is a gender dynamic that the movement has been wrestling with for a number of decades, which is sad to see because we are leading those spaces. And yet our experiences are not amplified at the scale to which a lot of our Black men have basically garnered.
Robin and Luna telling it like it is. A comment from Rehanna Khan Parker. The pandemic has shown the huge vacuum between the haves and the marginalized, which hitherto the needs of the latter was hushed and hidden and brushed under the carpet. And it took Khoza and Floyd to bring it to the table. And she also says Black women suffer from double discrimination. I want to move on from there to some controversial topics. And Luna, I'm throwing this mic at you. The violent and often deadly tactics used by US police have been learned by from the illegal apartheid state of Israel. Now, Flint in Michigan still doesn't have clean water. Meanwhile, the US government is donating billions to Israel to maintain its stranglehold over occupied Palestine for the last 72 years. How can or will Black Lives Matter work towards ending this murderous training and this illegal cash flow to apartheid Israel?
It's on you, Luna.
It's Luna, yeah.
I mean, I think outside of the U.S. context, a lot of countries at this point are constantly looking at the U.S. Because the U.S. likes to be in everybody else's business, telling countries how to run themselves. Also supplying countries with the supplying countries with, like the tools to really create mass destruction around the world. How absolute worse. People during even this pandemic, we're talking about people who cannot have access to healthcare. We're talking about people without housing. We're talking about both, Robin and I've been in that struggle, and it's just a beginning, but it's not even enough for a lot of families. They have to work multiple jobs. Right now, we're talking about Black Lives Mattering, and we're talking about, the state of the women who are being murdered also at the hand of the police. And we've actually had to create another hashtag so that we can remember the woman by say her name.
Say her name.
Because we had to tell people to say her name. Even if we got rid of the police, right, the reason the police exist is to protect that capital. If folks actually had stable housing, folks actually had enough income to provide for their families, that is assuming capitalism is still around. Hopefully it's gone. Yeah, and if folks actually in this moment had proper healthcare access, maternity leave, things like that, in order to keep things anywhere in control.
Well, I know there's more invested into law
Right, because
enforcement than
people will
there is
have
into social
their
development.
needs. Crimes go low when people's needs are met. And so even when we talk about in this current place, when I moved from East Africa
Sorry, Luna, your network is a bit patchy at the moment. I'm not sure if you need to move around a bit.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think I think about the first time that I moved here and how I saw more homeless folks in the state of Minnesota than I did in my own country ever. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Hello?
Yeah.
Are you hearing me better?
Yeah, we can hear you now. There's a bit of a delay, but we can hear you better now.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, sounds good. I think that was it.
Can I
Okay,
add
all right.
something to
Yes, please.
Israel question?
Yeah.
This is something that I think also where BLM, what's really important under like a working class analysis is we need to bring in broad segments of the labor unions, because we have labor unions that are part of the process of transporting those weapons to the US. And we've had moments where I forgot the specific name of the unions, but those who do oversee cargo ships and transportation and things of that nature, they've stood in solidarity before in previous anti-war movements and said that we will not ship or open these containers to stand in solidarity. It's similar to the moment that we're experiencing here in Minneapolis, where our bus drivers, the bus drivers union ATU, actually stood in solidarity with protesters and said that we will not provide our buses to the police to arrest peaceful protesters. And that is the type of solidarity that unions can bring. You are part of the process of bringing these weapons to the country. Stop, lead a strike, lead a picket, amplify that these weapons cannot cross the waters, so that they can be used to brutalize and annihilate peaceful protesters, especially Black and brown folks who are exercising their democratic rights against an unjust system. So I think that plays a pivotal role. I mean, the labor movement could play a pivotal role in basically eliminating that access towards those weapons. It also shows that, I mean, our movement has some work to do in terms of wrestling with a lot of our Jewish and Israeli community members who are not understanding how this particular moment, this historical moment, is so representative of what's happening in their own home. For you to have a racial an ethnic apartheid system set up between Israel and Palestine. And I said this earlier in another interview. It boggles me that we have a lot of Jewish folks who understands and pay homage to the memory of the Holocaust and how detrimental that was to their community, and then be part of the same process of leading genocidal and brutalizing efforts against other ethnic communities, or to not stand in solidarity with communities who are also facing annihilation threats and actions from the state, which is what Black people are experiencing and have been experiencing. So for you to not make the connections between how white fascism and capitalism led for over 4 million of your own people to be murdered. And we've had a similar dynamic play out in the US. And then now with our sisters and brothers in Palestine, like, for you to not understand your complicity in that, and to really stand and pay homage to your history of injustice, this is the moment to do so.
Powerful point made there on the issue of apartheid, Israel, solidarity, the role of the workers' unions, and of course the need to demand that those policies that say America can donate billions to Israel or go and do police training in Israel have got to stop. Comments from Pesna Aston, who's also been on the show. She says, change has never come about by being polite. Shabnam, the world has stood up and finally taken note of Black Lives Matter, hence the intense pushback from right-wing quarters. We're going to have to go to another break now, and I'm going to have to limit the number of questions I'm going to ask you in the next segment. When we come back, we'll be talking more about the industrial prison system in the US and who benefits when we come back after the break.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media, humanitarian journalism. With over 80 years of experience, IG Hussein and Company are renowned for their quality Islamic wear and goods. IG Hussein and Company stock a variety of Islamic items, musallas, kitabs, Medina dates, perfumes and exclusive gifts. We guarantee you a unique and friendly shopping experience for the entire family. Visit our new branch in Overport at 202 Kenilworth Park, Brickfield Road. Open 7 days a week with ample parking and wheelchair friendly. Like us on Facebook or Instagram at IG Hussein for our latest promotions and updates. IG Hussein and Company, your Islamic lifestyle.
Once again, winter has made itself known, and thousands are left to face this harsh season in utter destitution. Assist those in need this winter by sponsoring a blanket and mask for only 150 Rand, or a winter humanitize pack for only 350 Rand, which includes blankets, scarves, gloves, candles, beanies, and masks. Call 011 834 8685 or donate online at africamuslimsagency.co.za. The AMA winter distribution runs throughout South Africa. Africa Muslims Agency, inspiring the spirit of giving.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
And we are back on the People's Voice in conversation with Robin Wonsley and Luna Gebriel. We've got two comments that I want to read quickly while our guests get back on camera. Pesna Aston says to us that she's talking about the Second Amendment here. Let me just find that comment. I've often said that the Second Amendment does not apply to black and brown people. Quite simply, if police are that brutal towards unarmed people, imagine what would happen if they were armed. The Bill of Rights also needs a relook, and that's the South African Bill of Rights. And she says, thank you for your constant work on injustice and creating awareness. It's gaining so much traction, Shabnam Palesa Mohamed. Thank you, Tesna. Much appreciated, my sister. So I'm going to skip two questions. The one was about Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. If you're watching the show by now, you should understand what we're talking about. And let me just say, Black Lives Matter, too. Okay, that should help you understand it. And the other question that we're skipping is about the vandalizing and the looting. We know, of course, that there's agent provocateurs involved. There always have been, to discredit movements, and video evidence hopefully is going to hold water in court, and they should be taken to task. But I want to move from there to those of us who are awake to it, know the agenda behind the disproportionate arrest, sentencing, and imprisonment of people of color in the US and globally. It is to create a profit for prison industrial system. It's the same with the inhumane immigration systems, and of course Guantanamo Bay, of course, it's still open. What kind of strategies is the Black Lives Matter movement and its allies discussing to make sure that all of this is dismantled? Luna?
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me better now?
Much better.
I feel like it's still in the beginning stages of, in terms of dismantling all this. When we talk about dismantling systems, it's about transitioning from what we have always known for generations, to getting to something new. Even now, when we talk to people about dismantling the police or really abolishing the police, it's some people are like, what are we gonna do without the police? And I'm like, we have lived in a society without the police before, and we can do it again. There's a small town in Mexico that actually threw out its police and its politicians 7 years ago, and they have been doing their own community-based work for a very long time. And so when we talk about dismantling, we are talking about a period of transition. And so when it doesn't just happen overnight, it will happen by slowly moving the millions and millions and millions of dollars that go into the police force, right? Just riot gear for one person costs around what, $50,000. And so what can you do with that, right? Just imagine what different community organizations and different places can do with that. And if you take millions and millions of dollars from the police department and year by year are slowly transitioning that money into affordable housing, you're transitioning that so that folks who are working get fair wages. You are transitioning so that people have, like universal health care, all of these things that require for people to have their basic human needs met, or we are actually putting it into recreational centers, right? After school programs for children, literally anything and everything, psychological access, right, for mental health. If we are putting it into all of this, we are talking about how we are slowly reprioritizing humanity over the needs to criminalize people, right? Black people make up a little bit over 13% of the United States population, but make up 70% of the prison industrial complex. And so when we look at even numbers, for those who do like numbers or statistics, statistically, it's still messed up. And when how we even transition, it's a transitional period. Most people are like, how can we live without the police? What do we do with crimes? When you take care of the needs that people actually have, you will have a lower crime rate. People don't steal because they want to steal, right? People steal because there's a need that needs to be filled. They steal to provide for their families. Right.
Well, except
Unless
for the
you're a
politicians
corporation.
and the corporations, exactly.
Yes.
Steal because they're bloody greedy. Okay, so I want to move on from there. Initially, I had mixed feelings about this Black Lives Matter sign being painted onto the street. I think it was in DC, because we're wary about the movement being hijacked. I know that it was a woman mayor who was involved in that, but this sort of performative act perhaps was rejected by the masses, who instead called for the police to be defunded. And of course, it started up this debate that Luna's just been talking about as to, can we really do this? And yes, absolutely, we can put money into social development. You won't need as much for law enforcement, and there are alternatives, which you've outlined as well. But Robin, I want to ask you this question because it's something that worries me. These police, military, and private security have to prove how necessary they are. They have to prove how relevant they are now that they're seeing that there is a call for them to be defunded. It's very easy for them to pull off some sort of a false flag attack and say, see, you need us. Is the movement aware of this, and how are we going to counteract it? Because it's scary.
I think the movement is aware of it. In fact, in I would say the fourth day of the first week of the uprising, we saw the state try to shift towards that exact narrative by saying, look, we need to not trust that it's all peaceful protesters on the ground. It's white supremacists in there. There's instigators. There's all the bad people who are trying to co-opt a peaceful movement. And in order for us to discern who's the good people, the good protesters and the bad protesters, give us, as your political leaders, your state leaders, the authority to bring in more military and to accept President Trump's invitation to bring in the National Guard on the streets, who will basically go out into the streets and try to survey and identify and pick up the bad protesters. And within of 24 hours, the public saw that that was a complete lie. All the folks that were arrested were people who lived in Minneapolis. They were peaceful protesters. Again, the role of social media. We saw video footage of National Guards attacking peaceful protesters all throughout the city. We saw them throwing flash grenades into the houses of people who were just chilling at home. So they actually have tried that, and that's what actually prompted our communities to take a step back and say, "Oh shit, we're really in this just for ourselves. We need to do some community defense committees to really figure out how do we care and protect for ourselves in the absence of the police and fire, the fire department." And I think that conversation is still happening right now. Now that we've built this momentum and have gotten, variety of public institutions to divest from the Minneapolis Police Department, right now, our movement should not think that they've done anything substantial, because what we should anticipate in the next year is a counter movement from the police, where they are going to do that. They're going to try to galvanize their working class white bases and poor bases, and their goonies in City Hall and in state leadership to say, you need us. Look what happens when we're not there. You're going to have the world fall apart. It's going to be another purge. They can definitely try to incite incidents that will cause public outrage and maybe public solidarity with the police. We should also be clear that there's a huge segment of working class Black folks who are not necessarily bought into the demand around defunding the police. And our police officers will try to build alliances with those working class Black folks, because as Luna said, Black folks are only thinking, we're going to wake up and there's no police tomorrow. Who do our call? Because we have not done the work or the scale of work that is needed in our communities to build that transitional program, to build those infrastructures of care. So people are thinking, I won't have anything to protect myself. So we can definitely should anticipate movements of working class Black people saying, no, I don't want this, in those communities, building alliances with the police to then counteract this huge momentum that the BLM movement has built up around divesting and defunding and dismantling the Minneapolis Police Department and the overall police state. So we should definitely anticipate that, and it's going to take us not relying on political leaders, elected officials who will turn their backs and sell you out. We've already had that happen in Minneapolis, whereas we had 9 council members on Sunday said that they agreed with the intentions or pledge to dismantle the police, and already in 24 hours their tweets or on Twitter have said something completely different. They're backpedaling just 24 hours later. So we should not be under the pretense that we're following in their direction and giving them trust that they're going to carry this out. It's going to take our movement to continue building those relationships with labor and working class Black folks to actually realize this.
It's exactly why when I see them taking a knee or extending a hand, it makes me incredibly uncomfortable how much of that is actually sincere when 2 of them, the goons in their squad, knocked over a 75-year-old man who was bleeding from his ear, presumably the same color as them. The 2 of them went to court. 57, the rest of the squad actually resigned because the 2 of them were taken up on criminal charges. And the whole crowd of them were outside the court to cheer them. So how seriously do we actually take it? But speaking of racist robots, let's talk about the Colston statue. It's a statue of a slave owner and a slave driver that was pushed into the river, right? And this action really, really hit home for me. In South Africa, we still have colonial statues staring us in the face at our city hall and everywhere around the country, really. Some statues that people have taken down, you may have heard of the Rhodes movement, have taken down the Peace Must Fall movement that's been responsible for making sure that the Rhodes statue came down, and others still need to be. But what is the symbolism of the statue falling, and what do you say to those who say, well, it's not really significant, or by removing the statues, you're actually erasing history, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, the symbolism is the constant re-traumatization of the people of the past and of historically what has happened in order for us to be where we are now, which is in a very exploitative, under very, very like violent systems. And so the symbol is that when it's still standing there, it's looking at you straight in your face. It's almost like a physical, like tangible thing of the horrible and horrid histories that have happened. So for me, like the fact that they're being taken down, and it's less about the destruction of the statue itself and more about saying enough is enough, and like people actually rising up and saying we don't want to see this, we don't even want this. It's all of it really is a symbolism. And I also encourage people taking it down. I think everywhere, even in Europe, folks are beginning to take down some of those colonial statues. And you know, even until even like what 2017, 2018, there was a lot happening in the US, especially in the southern part of the United States, where people were taking down slave owners who used to be slave owners and generals within military who were known for the exploitative and horrible things that they did to Black people. And so when they would take them down, it was a symbol to say we don't want to see this. It is not someone who can be honored. How can you not honor Black life while it's still here, but you dare honor something that never ever honored Black lives and constantly capitalize off the labor, the free labor for hundreds of years of Black people. It's really about the symbolism of taking it down, and really that doesn't, it's not the dismantling of the system, but that in and of itself is the beginning to say we don't need this. And it's people standing up to their masters, right? People saying we do not want to see this anymore, we no longer want to be under this. This has to go. It doesn't deserve honor. It was never ever honorable.
Never honorable. A comment from Pralini Naidu, highly protected colonial statues, and that's a South African who knows what we're talking about there. Thank you for your commitment to global justice. Thank you, Pralini. Before we go to break, I want to mention this very quickly. We've touched on it already, so I'm not going to phrase it as a question. But there's a slogan in South Africa that's quite popular, and you would have heard of it: an injury to one is an injury to all. So simultaneously, the words of people like Steve Biko, Leila Khaled, Malcolm X, Angela Davis, Martin Luther King, Arundhati Roy resonate with most people. But there are some people who say, you know, those problems are happening in another country. We've got our own. We've got corruption. We've got crime. And as activists, we know that resistance is intersectional. Black lives matter. Women's lives matter. Poor people's lives matter. Palestinian lives matter. And I was going to ask you what your thoughts are on that view, but I know exactly where you stand on that through the context of this conversation, that solidarity is indivisible and beyond borders. When we come back after the break, we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 lockdown and economic apartheid.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
It's time to act now. COVID-19 is a global pandemic, and we need your help to flatten the curve. Islamic Relief is reaching out to the most vulnerable of our community in South Africa, Yemen and Gaza. 400 Rand can provide a family with a food pack in South Africa, and 500 Rand a hygiene pack in Syria, Yemen and Gaza. With your help, we can save lives across the world. Donate now. Go to www.islamic-relief.org.za.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, consultations. Call now on 042 203 1400 or visit quantu.co.za. The Quantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
And we're back on The People's Voice with Shabnam Palesa Mohamed on Salam Media, and our Black Lives Matter activists from America, Robin Wonsley and Luna Gebriel, and we'll see them on camera in a sec. I'm going to read a comment from Rashida Khan before we move on to the last three questions that we have for our superb guest today. She says, yes, we have to stand with everyone in every country or gender orientation, because together we are stronger and we can make an impact. It sounds little, but if all we do is show solidarity and cause awareness, it's something. We cannot remain silent. I'm not seeing Luna. Perhaps she's going to rejoin us using that link again. But let's talk about this, Robin. Even before COVID-19, like in most countries, the gap between the elite and the rest, and gap is such a euphemism, it grows every day, every year. It's how they maintain control. South Africa is no exception. We have the largest mountain between the elite and the rest in the world, the Gini coefficient. And this lockdown has exacerbated the economic apartheid. Now, for me and for us, there's no freedom without socioeconomic freedom. Talk to us about the socioeconomic conditions for the 99% in the US before lockdown, Robin.
I mean, it was exactly just what you highlighted. We still have less than 1% of the entire U.S. population who owns more than half of the global world's wealth. So we have maybe about two handfuls of people who own, again, more than half of the world's wealth that are based in the United States. Whereas the rest of us, there's this idea that different classes exist. Like a lot of working class people want to hold on to this idea that there is the working class, there's the poor, there's the middle class, when those boundaries have become very blurred since 2008, I want to say, when we had our most recent economic recession under both President Obama and President Bush. We have folks who still, like with the fight for 15, it was around this basis that we have more than 40% of our population that are not even earning $30,000 a year to meet their basic necessities. But we see urban cities all across the country, their cost of living is increasingly rising. Yet our wages, both at a city level and a national level, has not risen in more than 5 decades. Our federal minimum wage is still $7, whereas most cities across the country, let alone your rent, most of our folks are allocating 30% of their limited income towards rent and their basic necessities. So we have these huge economic disparities between the very uber rich, because I think our movements get very confused about when we talk about tax the rich or going after the rich. We're not talking about like your governor. We're not talking about who's another basic millionaire, or like someone who's making $100,000. Like, if people literally think they're rich, those who are making $100,000 but are also bogged down by student debt, by mortgages, like living in the U.S. is basically living a debt servitude life. You are constantly in debt. So folks think that you're going after them, when it's like, no, we're going after Jeff Bezos, who already were worth trillions of dollars before the pandemic, and his wealth actually tripled during the pandemic. So we even see during economic crises. Exactly.
Epidemic of expediency. We've got 5 minutes to go. So and 2 more questions. So very quickly, Luna, Robin's taken us through the economic apartheid before lockdown. The situation, of course, exacerbated after lockdown, especially for the 99%. Tell us about what people are suffering, what they're going through during the lockdown and beyond. What's in store?
Yeah, I mean, as a person who is currently working for a worker center, what we saw as an effect of COVID lockdown was a lot of our people, a lot of our members who are mostly Black and brown workers have lost their jobs. And a lot of people first began by reducing of hours, and then they were laid off. And what was really wild for me, but not surprising, was people were still dealing with wage theft. We were still dealing with wage theft cases. And so people would come to us and talk about how a boss did not want to give them their last check or messed up on something over time or whatever, when it was the time that people needed it the most. And so a lot of people were laid off, not just for load, right? It's not like something when it opens up, they can just go back. Majority of our people, of our base, were now trying to figure out, how are we going to pay rent? How are we going to put food on the table? And so most people started uptaking rent strikes. And so they decided, we are not going to pay rent if we're not being paid, which is correct, because both on a municipal level, so even on the city level, they were not creating enough funding for people to have access to it. And so one of the things that I was involved in was we had started to begin creating mutual aid. And so in order to actually fundraise money to give to people, to send it out. And a lot of the people that we focused on were undocumented Black and brown people, because they do not have access to some of the governmental things like unemployment. Clearly they no longer have a job, but they no longer also have access to governmental aid, such as unemployment or connecting with orgs that mainly were working with citizens of the United States. And so a lot of the time we see who's consistently disenfranchised when things like this happen. And we realize constantly why our government fails us, because they are never set up to take care of those, the 99% that Robin is talking about. There's nothing set up to take care of those, but we see corporations constantly getting richer and richer. And our governor is making all these different rules, but you have a mansion you're living in, right? You have a place that you have a place to live in. You still have a job. You still have food on your table. Your children are not the ones that are worried, right? But we have working class children going to bed and their parents going to bed wondering, are we going to be here tomorrow? Right? Not understanding that some people are still essential workers and have to go out still and still do care work. And by the time they may bring back COVID back home, but we have such a shitty healthcare system that they probably don't even have access to. So where is the care that they actually deserve during this time while corporations were getting richer? And so it was at that point.
As South Africans, we can totally identify with you, Luna. Meanwhile, the banks are fine because people are forced to go to the bank for loans. So it's an engineered economic apartheid, right? But let's move on from the last two questions. What policies and strategies are being created to ensure that the 99% are less dependent on this predator capitalism, that we're sustainable, that we have a voice? And what's changing as a result of this activism? What successes can you share with us that we should be celebrating since the beginning of this renewed Black Lives Matter movement? Robin?
I would definitely point to to my comrades in Seattle. There's a phenomenal socialist movement and anti-racist movement there, where they're leading efforts to tax Amazon, so that they can actually have money and funding to go in towards building, affordable housing, meeting those basic needs, and creating those social safety nets that we know provide care and security and safety and wellness to our communities, as opposed to policing and exploitative jobs, as Luna talked about. So I would honestly say, like, campaigns like that, where we are explicit that no, we're not looking to working class people who are already struggling to meet our basic needs. We need to be taxing the rich who constantly are given loopholes and taxpayer subsidies to maintain their profits. We need to start in really intervening and disrupting their flows of funding and capital. So I really point to the work that our comrades are doing in Seattle, where they are launching those explicit campaigns. The Fight for 15 movement was an explicit campaign of, we need to be going directly at Fortune 500 businesses who consider themselves to be small business. Amazon is not a small business. You can pay more than $15 an hour to your employees, and you should. So we have to keep having these very concrete demands that goes at the Fortune 500 companies that do concentrate profits. And I'm hoping in this divestment campaign, we tie that towards our demands under the Black Lives Matter banner. Not only should we be defunding the police and taking that funding to reinvest back into our communities, we need to make sure that any corporation that's in our city is paying property taxes, which they do not. They should be also paying their workers more than a livable wage and allowing them to unionize. Like, there should be an expansive package of demands that also ties into how our business community has failed us and contributes to our daily exploitation.
100%. We've run out of
policing to happen.
Robin, we've run out of time, but I'm going to beg the station for just a minute to answer the last question. And I know there's a list of accomplishments and successes, and I'm going to paste that comment onto this video so people can see the list of successes that have happened during this campaign. But last question, I'll throw the mic to you, Luna. How can South Africans who believe in Ubuntu, or I am because you are, support Black Lives Matter? How can people around the world work together for truth, justice, equality, and freedom? And what's your message to people who are standing in solidarity for a just and peaceful world?
Because none of these struggles. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
None of these struggles are separate from each other. And so to the folks that are already out there doing the thing, keep doing it. I mean, we have to be very assertive, very unapologetic in the way that we're moving, because not only do future generations depend on us, we are talking about how the planet is depending on us to move this. And to actually build solidarity between each other in order to win the things that we're winning. It's not only about winning it, it's about human life. And there's nothing more sacred than human life, but to thrive collectively. And at the end of it all, I think we win collectively. I think we constantly talk about how white supremacy also doesn't do white people any good. When we talk about white people within the United States, it is the absence of origin, the absence of losing something that is bigger than yourself to connect to, right? And so when we say I am because we are, I am because you are, it's a deeper connection in humanity. And I think someone earlier said we need to start having those conversations. And not only do we need to turn out en masse, we need to organize. We have to organize so that it becomes something permanent. It becomes, the changes do not ever go back to the way that we are. We are talking about that right now within the city of Minneapolis. We cannot go back to the way that things are. We have to take this and move it forward one way or another and build solidarity with the rest of the world like y'all to actually move this, because we can't even do it alone. And that's something that people do not understand is liberation cannot happen only in the US. It has to happen on a global level.
Liberation's got to happen on a global level. There's nothing more sacred than human life. No justice, no peace. And as we say in South Africa, Amandla Awetu. Thank you to our guests, Luna Gebriel and Robin Wonsley, Black Lives Matter activists, for joining us today on The People's Voice. More power to your struggle, and just know that South Africans stand in solidarity with you.
Solidarity to you all.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so that's our show, The People's Voice, for today, Tuesday, the 9th of June on Salam Media. For Salam Media, I'm Shabnam Palesa Mohamed saying revolutionary peace. Assalamu alaikum.